Let's talk about the top 10 business tax credits and deductions for child care agencies and daycare centers.
One in a million, one in a million, one in a million. You know they're coming up to me, cause I'm just the kind of flower that's stinging in the beat, but the rhythm's getting higher. Go, 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 go. One in a million, one in a million, one in a million, one in a million, one in a million.
Welcome back, folks, to another edition of the Awesome Studio Kiwi Show. How are you today? I hope you are doing fantastic. I'm doing marvelous, if you were to ask me. If you are doing as great as I am, go grab a cup of coffee or tea or vodka and let's roll. In today's conversation, I want to speak to you about the top 10 business tax credits and deductions for child care agencies and daycare centers. Number one, rent. So the location for your daycare is actually something you can write off on your tax return, not a problem. It is a business tax deduction, okay? So you can actually, so if you plan, one thing that's really important is that if you run your daycare center from your house, it's really, really important to differentiate whatever mortgage or rent you pay for the apartment or the house in general versus the one that you allocate to the daycare center. This is really important. The IRS is really adamant at making sure people comply. So, for example, if you commit 25% of the square footage in the house to your daycare center, make sure that means what, that your mortgage or rent will be 25% of that mortgage or rent will be allocated to the business, to the daycare business. Very important, okay? And but if you actually run your daycare center out of a recreational center, a church, a local business, or even a school, then you have to make sure that whatever rent is allocated to that daycare center in that location actually applies. So it's really important. So one thing we also want to say here is that when we talk about rent as a business tax deduction, make sure that you can document it. Make sure that you have your monthly rent payments. There is a contract, there is a lease, there is a valid lease agreement, there is a valid rental agreement that shows clearly how much you are paying. So big decision time. Are you doing daycare right now from your house? If yes, are you keeping track of expenses? Okay, do you maintain a clear segregation between your personal home-related expenses on one hand and your daycare business expenses on the other? This is really important. So this segregation, this separation is clear. It must be clear because, God forbid, if you are audited by the IRS, they will ask for paperwork. They will ask for substantiate. You have to substantiate whatever you are saying. So if you say I'm allocating 25% of the rent to the daycare, they have to be able to see it. Number two, direct cost. So whatever costs are directly associated with the daycare center or the child care agency that you run, you can actually write that off. So things like indoor and outdoor play equipment, toys, art supplies, cleaning supplies, child care supplies like diapers and wipes, business laptop. So those are directly associated with running the business. Okay, licensing fees, for example, food for snacks or meals, bottles, cups, plates, etc. If you have, this is optional, but some daycare centers, depending on the size and the location, you might have a car or reliable transportation agreement. Let's say you have a bus that comes to pick you up or pick the kids up, whatever contract, whatever agreement you have, and that is directly associated with the daycare center, then you can actually write that off. It's important when we talk about direct costs. It's important, again, going back to what I said about the substantiation principle. You have to be able to substantiate whatever. You have to be able to prove beyond any doubt to the IRS auditor or to any state tax authority that those costs are directly associated with running the daycare center or child care agency. And there are a lot of people. There are a lot of ways you can do that. You can have, if you use accounting software, it's a lot easier. You can use the QuickBooks, you can use Wave, you can use Zero to actually track those expenses But it's also important to, but if you do manual accounting, if you do it yourself or you have an accountant in-house, make sure that they are able to file all the paperwork away in a very safe place. I'm talking here about receipts. I'm talking, so for instance, if you buy toys, if you buy art supplies, if you buy cleaning supplies, if you have childcare supply, if you buy those supplies, make sure that you keep the receipts, because again, if the IRS wants to reconcile, if they want to reconcile whatever you are charging, whatever you are deducting on your business tax returns, and they want to reconcile that amount to the actual amount or the receipts, it's really important at that point to have the right receipt. Very, very critical. The third thing you can deduct is payroll. So payroll, when we talk about payroll, it is a broad item here. It is a broad term here. So for example, when you can be, if you are alone, if you run your daycare center by yourself, you're probably getting a salary every month or every 2 weeks, right? So this is important that you can deduct that. Obviously, you're going to pay taxes on that income at the personal level. But if we're speaking about that as a business tax deduction, your salary yourself you can actually deduct that. If you have staff around, if you have a larger daycare center or childcare agency and you are paying staff, you can definitely deduct all that expenses also. And this is what when I'm talking about, the payroll term can be brought here. And when we talk about staff compensation, those staff members can be either in-house or outsourced, quote unquote outsourced. In other words, they can be temps, they can be seasonal workers. Okay, if you are in an area where you know that you will need a lot of help around Christmas, or you'll need a lot of help around the holidays, and you pay people seasonally, that's also part of your payroll. Obviously, for those staff members, you're going to have to issue 1099 NEC or other forms of non-employee compensation forms. But we also talk about anything that you outsource to contractors. So if you have subcontractors and you are paying them certain amounts, and as long as they are doing work directly associated with the daycare center itself, you can actually include in that broad category of payroll the payments you make to those individuals, to those professionals, or to the professionals. Okay, and also make sure that all child care staff undergo criminal background checks and provide references to ensure the safety of the children. That's in case you want to hire people on a full-time basis or on a part-time basis. Okay, so you want to make your hiring decisions carefully to keep your facilities safe and maintain a stellar reputation. Very important. When we talk about children in general, you have to be extra careful. That you already know. I don't need to explain to you, but hey, it is what it is. So you have rent, you have direct cost, you have payroll. And you also need legal. So legal is a top business tax deduction. And especially if you run a daycare center. Why? Because you have to pay lawyers to draft all kinds of contracts and also provide ongoing legal support if necessary. As I said before, when we deal with children, you have a constellation of risks that you have to take into account, and you gotta have the right legal guidance to know exactly that you are complying, that you are not running afoul of the law. Very important. So you need to draft up a contract. So the thing here is that the parents who come to your facility are essentially your clients, and you want to have a solid contract in place to protect yourself from any legal issues, right? So this is why I was just telling you, hey, listen. So if you have a lawyer who writes contract for you or who provides ongoing legal guidance, you need to pay them. Now, it's really important to say that on the contract, you will have things like, how do you expect to be paid? How will you handle late payments? What time should parents come to pick up their children? Are there consequences for late pickup? What services will you provide? What is your policy when it comes to sick children? Do you offer refunds? If so, under what conditions? What happens if a child is injured at your facility? So those are important elements in the contract. So I'm just saying those, I'm just repeating those questions here, because if you currently don't have a contract in place, or you have a contract that is not complete, please do so right now. And whatever you pay to that lawyer to draft the contract, you can write it off in your on your business tax return. Okay. And also, you need to establish policies and procedures, not only for your staff but also for families. Okay. And those procedures are important because they may include an emergency plan, safety procedures, privacy protocols, and rules for your facility. Okay, so having those procedures in place will help you keep the children safe and protect yourself from liability in some instances. And children's safety is the number one priority here. So in establishing your policies, be sure to review your local child care licensing requirements to ensure compliance. And if you cannot write the policy yourself, again, you want to outsource the task. You want to enlist the help of a professional. And again, whatever you pay that professional, you can write it off on your business tax return. Advertising is the next item you can write off. Not a problem. So when we talk about advertising, there are a lot of ways, there are a lot of things that are included in this category. So if you market your daycare, so you have your daycare, you have your daycare set up and open for business, or it has already been in business for a while. So whatever you do to get your families in the door, that you can write it off. Okay, so that's where it means to market yourself to attract potential clients. Okay, and so to establish your daycare as a professional business, consider building a website, consider buying a domain name and building a website that provides more information about your services. So a basic website can cost somewhere from $10 to $1,000. It depends if you are looking for a custom design. So whatever you pay for that custom design, the website, you can actually write it off. Okay, and anything you pay for SEO. So SEO means search engine optimization. That's how you actually attract organic traffic from Google. Okay, that way when families search for a daycare center near them, your business is likely to show up in the search results. Okay, and you can also promote your daycare on social media. So whatever you actually pay for promoting, whatever you actually incur in terms of fees in promoting your daycare center or childcare agency on social media, as diverse as Facebook, as YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, whatever your target audience is, you actually can deduct that on your business tax return. Okay, and it's important to understand that you have to, if you want to do it right, the right way of doing it, you can create a business Facebook page to post more information about your daycare, collect client testimonials, and keep families up to date with events at your daycare. You can also post on Instagram and LinkedIn with targeted hashtags to attract families in your area. And as your business grows, you might decide to invest in paid marketing services. A digital marketing agency or consultant can help you increase your business's presence online, outrank your local competitors, and attract new clients. And again, anything you pay to those professionals, to that digital marketing agency, you can write it off, no problem, on your tax return. Also, compliance. So anything that you do around daycare licensing, it's important. Okay, so it's you have to understand, you might have started off as a babysitter or a nanny, but in order to start a full-on daycare business or to run a full-on daycare business, you need to meet the proper licensing requirements in order to be legal. And again, if you have the right lawyer around you, you can actually you should be fine. But the thing is, you want to stay in contact permanently with your state's Department of Children and Family Services to learn about whatever specific regulations apply for the child care providers in your area. I'll be right back right after this, so don't go anywhere. Welcome back, folks, to another session of the Awesome Sweetie Kiwi Show. We are still having a conversation about the top 10 business tax credits and deductions for child care centers and daycare centers. So number 7, you have continuing education. So anything you actually spend in terms of early childhood education classes for yourself or your staff, you can write it off, not a problem. Okay. And again, you don't need to have a professional child care experience to run or even start a daycare business, but having some understanding of early childhood development is strongly encouraged, especially if you want to stay in this business for a while. So whatever expenses you have revolving around that, this is fine. You can write it off, not a problem. Okay. And so even if you get a degree, let's say you get a degree in early childhood education also, this is kind of cool. And deduction number 8, insurance. So get insurance. I mean, you need to have insurance. We are talking about a home daycare insurance. Okay. So you have home daycare insurance or you have daycare insurance in general. So home daycare insurance is specifically for those entrepreneurs who run their daycare business from home. But if you run it from elsewhere, then it's just simply daycare insurance. Okay. So a smaller home daycare can be it can be a gratifying experience, but there are risks. So you really want to have the right insurance also. But daycare insurance in general, or sometimes it's called child care insurance, is coverage designed to meet the needs of small daycare centers. Okay, and so you will need home or location-based daycare insurance, and whatever they charge you for that, you can write it off. So the thing here is that if you don't have it right now, I'm here to tell you need it. You need to have liability protection for your daycare. So things like general liability, things like commercial auto liability. Okay, because any company-owned vehicles you use to transport kids will need to be covered should the unexpected happen. This is usually a requirement for home daycares or also location-based daycare centers. If you have a business vehicle, okay, you have corporal punishment liability. So if you or one of your employees is accused of hitting one of your charges, you should be held liable. You could be held liable for the legal cost. So this coverage helps protect you in the event of an insurance claim. You also have abuse and molestation liability. So similar to corporal punishment liability, if one of your employees is accused of or found to be sexually abusive to a child under your care, this liability coverage can help protect your business. Okay, and so this is kind of important. So the thing here is that the protection is financial, because if you might have fees, legal costs, or medical expenses that you might be required to pay. So again, those things, insurance and continuing education, you can write them off, not a problem, on your business tax return. Number 9, we have operations. So operations is actually a broad term that encompasses anything you actually spend on preparing, on maintaining your daycare center. Okay, anything else you do, anything that you do to make sure your daycare center, your child care agency is as welcoming to clients, welcoming to children, welcoming to your staff members as possible. So you can write those costs off. Those costs are different from daycare center to daycare center. So we will not spend we cannot have an exhaustive list of those expenses here. Okay, and if you can also create a business plan. You can create a daycare business plan. You can have someone write it for you. Again, this is part of if you let's say you want to get a business loan, or you want to attract investors in your daycare center, you want to grow. Whatever people charge you for that business plan, for that daycare business plan, you can write it off. Okay, and anything that you spend in providing top quality care for the kids, this is kind of cool. You can actually write off. Remember, the success of your daycare center depends on you providing top quality care to your families. Okay, so if the kids at your facility are properly cared for, and even better, enjoy coming to your daycare, you are likely to attract more referral business. Very important. Okay, and so number 10, fundraising. So anything that you spend money on in terms of seeking out grants and funding, you can actually write it off. Things like fundraising costs Okay, if you hire a fundraising proposal writer, for example, you can actually deduct that. And if you hire someone to research possible tax credits that are actually associated with your daycare center, especially from state authorities, you can also write those costs off. Especially if you are running an in-home daycare, you may be eligible for certain tax reductions based on the fact that you are using your residence for business purposes. This means that you can essentially write off a portion of your housing cost. I've already said that at the beginning of this show, but yeah, okay. So it's important to have a clear idea of the top 10 business tax credits and deductions for child care centers. So to recap today's conversation, so what are those top 10 business tax credits and deductions? So we have rent, direct costs, payroll, legal, advertising, compliance, continuing education, insurance, operations, and fundraising costs. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. I'll see you next time. But until then, remember, stay marvelous.